Good morning, ghosties and ghoulies. Welcome back to the channel. I hope you're having a fantastic week so far and a wonderful spooky season. As we get towards the end of October, the veil is starting to thin and some paranormal activity might be on the uptick, and you might be interested in actually giving your hand towards trying out some paranormal investigation. And if you are, I'm here to let you know that you can do that without having to spend a lot of money on equipment. Of course, if you're like me and you really enjoy all things paranormal, you've probably seen a lot of those shows on television, like Paranormal Stories or Taps, that kind of thing. And you see that there is actually a fair amount of equipment that those people use in order to do their investigating. You don't need that equipment. I have a lot of that equipment, and I've accumulated equipment over the years. I would say I've spent in excess of $1,000 on equipment at this point. But I can tell you for sure that some of the best investigations I've ever actually taken part in have involved little to no equipment at all. In fact, sometimes having the equipment there is an impediment, because if you are lucky enough to be able to go into a historic place and be interacting with spirits from a different era, you may actually find that having a lot of electronic gadgetry and a lot of lights and sounds going off can actually impede the communication, because those people, and you gotta remember that these are people we're talking about, they didn't live in a time when there was a lot of electric lights and fancy gadgets and all kinds of noise and things going on. So they actually may be shy or reluctant to communicate with you if you have a lot of gadgetry with you. Now, that isn't true all the time. Sometimes you get a spirit that is from, you know, an era where there was absolutely no electronics, and they are fascinated with the electronics, and they'll be the first to drain your batteries. And it happens. But if you are just starting to get into the paranormal and are interested in investigating and checking it out, you can do that with no equipment at all. I will say, as far as an investigator's biggest and best tool that you can have at your disposal is the ability to remain silent. This is really hard, especially if you're investigating in a group. It's often very hard to communicate with each other in a quieter way, or to have an understanding that we don't want a lot of chatter, and that people can't be moving around a lot and making a bunch of noise, because you will miss things if you are making a bunch of noise. And if you're talking all the time. So my recommendation is, if you're going to investigate in a group, decide beforehand that you're going to give a certain amount of time in the investigation to silence and being quiet and really listening to what's going on around you, because you will be amazed at how often you will miss something if you are not letting that silence happen, especially if you're asking questions. If you're asking questions and trying to elicit a response, then you want to give that spirit time to gather energy in order to respond, because it does take energy for spirits to interact with us, to move objects or to make sounds, or even to you know, do things with interfering with our electronics and things like that. It does take energy from them. And it takes energy to communicate. So you need to give them time and not rush the process. It's nice. I can understand how, you know, you're excited, keeping that kind of dampened down a little bit and not having a lot of chatter and communication can be hard. But if you go into it with the mindset that you need to have silence as a goal inside of the investigation, then you are more likely to do it. So if you're going to investigate in a group, certainly talk about that beforehand. There's a lot of little things that you can do when you feel that you are starting to feel that you're in the presence of a spirit, to help you communicate, and they are very, very low cost things. One of the simplest things you can do is grab some thread, and you can use a ring or a key or anything of a decent weight. And what you do is you suspend the ring or key from the thread. And this can be done in many ways. This is a pendulum you're making. There are fancy pendulums you can go out and spend money on. They come in all kinds of materials and all kinds of crystals and metals, and none of that makes any difference. Your intent with the pendulum is the most important thing. And there are different ways of doing this as well. You can have a piece of paper where you write yes, no, and I don't know, and have the pendulum be able to swing between the words in order to start to form sentences and that kind of thing. Or you can simply make a decision on, if the pendulum swings in this manner, it means yes, and if it swings in that manner, it means no. And this is a very, very old method of communicating with the spirits, and it's often used for pregnant women when they're trying to determine what the sex of their child is. I'm not saying it always works for that, but it usually will work if you feel that you're in the presence of a spirit. And it's a simple way of communicating, and dead cheap, so we've got those. The other thing you can do with kind of a yes-no process to it is very simply using a candle. And you just light the candle, and you allow the spirit to influence the size and shape of the flame. And you can ask questions and say, oh, okay, if you are a woman, can you make the flame higher or change the shape of the flame? This is very, very easy and very, very inexpensive. You just need basically, Dollar Tree, dollar store candle will work. You don't need anything fancy. Certainly there are candles you can buy that are anointed with different oils and things that may aid the process, but they are absolutely not 100% necessary. So if you're just getting into it, you want a cheap, simple way of doing it, there you go. Candle is definitely on the top of my list. A simple piece of paper and a couple of markers or pencils. You have a couple of sheets of paper, be able to relax yourself, and you can try automatic writing. You need to be able to relax into it though, so this may take a little bit of meditative personality or take on a meditation kind of feeling to it. You just simply let your hand move across the paper and let the pen move or pencil move across the paper, and ignore what you're doing with your hand while you're doing it. And you will be asking questions at the same time and not consciously directing. You want your unconscious or something else to direct your hand. And you look at it afterwards and try and interpret what shapes and forms and even letters or numbers that you've put on the page subconsciously. So dead super cheap to do. It's very effective, especially if you can really float yourself down in your meditation quite deeply and really let go of the will of your hand. That's the hardest part, is letting go of the will of your hand, because sometimes if it starts to move, it can be startling, but you need to be able to relax into it. So that is absolutely 100% another great way to communicate and get answers from spiritual energies around you. The other thing is somewhat more complex, and it's definitely more on the side of electronics. If you can find a radio and take it off the station, take it to a station where there's simply static, and that's all that you hear on that station. If you feel that you're in the presence of spirit, you can oftentimes start to hear sounds inside the static. Sometimes this is a thing called audio matrixing, which means that sound isn't actually there. It's something that your ear is making up. Your brain and your ear are kind of functioning to fill in the gaps in the static. Sometimes it's that, and sometimes it isn't. And oftentimes what will happen is one person may be hearing. It's really good to have more than one person when you're doing this, because you can kind of confirm with each other with what you're hearing so that you know it's not audio matrixing. For example, we just did a game night. This was really fun. This is actually a sponsor of tonight's video, and I will put a link and everything in the description, and there'll be a little bit of an ad later on for you. It's very, very interesting, so stick around for it. It was a lot of fun. But during this game experiment, we did one of the experiments was with audio, and it was with white noise or static. And one of the participants in our group heard a full-on audio of a train station, like a busy train station, and then they started to hear like an old-fashioned fire alarm. And it was really, really interesting, because two of the other participants in the group didn't hear the train station, but they did hear something that sounded a lot like an old-fashioned fire alarm. So that gives us and then there were other people like myself, I didn't hear anything like that inside of that audio piece. So it was really, really fascinating. But what it meant was that there is something outside of audio matrixing, which is a very personal thing. So they wouldn't have heard it too. So this is very confirming that something was actually going on there. So you can absolutely do that. There's also a technique that you can use with a flashlight. Now it has to be a particular type of flashlight, and I unfortunately don't own one of these at the moment, and I mean to get some for future ghost hunts, because I think it's a fantastic way of trying to communicate on a very low budget. The type of flashlight you need is the long ones that turn on with the barrel, so you turn it to turn it on. What you do is you put it to the friction point of almost being on. And then you can allow the spirit to interact with it, and it can turn it off and on for yes or no. And if you want to get even more complicated, you can pick up 2 or 3 of these and have them mean different things, like male and female for the left and right, or whatever you want to do that way. That actually adds to the confirmation of anything you're asking. Anytime you can get redundancy into your investigation where more than one person is experiencing a phenomena, or more than one piece of equipment is picking up a phenomena, that is just further proof that something is actually happening, and it's not just your imagination or something like visual or audio matrixing and that kind of thing, which it can absolutely be at times. And the more you investigate, the longer you investigate, the more you become adept at understanding when that's happening, and being able to debunk, which is a big part of it too. Don't buy everything that you see, because sometimes a shadow's just a shadow. Okay, so the other thing that I'm going to talk about is just a basic direct communication, and this is where silence comes in. This is where this very, very old-fashioned way of doing things, where you hold hands with other people, you gather your energy, and you ask whatever spirit may be there to give you a sign, to make a noise, to move an object, to touch someone. I've had many experiences in seances, situations. I hate to call them that because that's a very old-fashioned word, and it has a lot of negative connotations to it, because a lot of, back in when it was really popular, in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, there was a lot of fraudulent mediums, and seances were oftentimes kind of subject to, yeah, that wasn't really happening, that was a device or an act of some sort. So I hesitate to use the word seance, but it is very much what you would see, what you would think of when you would think of a seance. So you sit around in a circle, you hold hands, and you ask for evidence or the approach of a spirit. So, and if you have a medium, sometimes that can also involve direct communication through a medium, or something like, even like automatic writing. So you can use these devices in conjunction with each other, which is really handy. But yeah, mediumship in that way, in the way of a seance, if you want to call it that, wonderful. You don't need anything for it. You just need some willing participants and a quiet place. And quiet is important because you don't want outside noise coming in and distracting you, or having you think that something is paranormal that isn't. It may just be the neighbor's cat, you know, that kind of thing. So there is that. The other thing that I'm going to talk about in more depth in another video are spirit boards. And you may know spirit boards more commonly as Ouija. Now, there's a lot about Ouija that has been filmed and talked about. Films have been made about them. There's a lot of negative connotation to them. My personal choice is it's your personal choice. I have used them. I've used them with some success. I think it's very important that you take it seriously when you use them. And I think that maybe this is where people run into trouble. If you don't know how to open and close doors, then maybe Ouija isn't something that you want to mess with. You can't approach it with fear, because it will scare you if you approach it with fear. You have to approach it with a very firm attitude and firm boundaries for what you're doing. So if things start to go off the rails, you know how to shut it down, and you know how to say goodbye, and you know how to tell the spirits in no uncertain terms that they are to leave and they are not allowed to attach themselves to the board, to yourself, or to anyone or anything in your vicinity. That is very important. And at any time when you're doing any kind of investigation, you become very uncomfortable and you start to feel threatened, or you feel that you're not in the mental place you need to be doing this kind of work, then you need to shut it down. It's like anything else. If you are not at your best, you're going to make mistakes. If you're not at your best, you are going to be weak and be manipulatable. That's not a word. You're going to, if you're not at your best, you're going to be weak. You're not going to have the kind of communication that you want. And you're going to be susceptible to suggestion from the other side, which is where a lot of times people run into trouble. But I do think Ouija can be used as a tool. There are other types of Ouija boards out there, or spirit boards out there. I actually had at one point a wonderful Native American board. But it is like anything else, you have to use it cautiously. And all of these things, if you're going to do any investigation over the next few weeks coming up to Halloween, do be careful. It's not, it can be fun. It can be a lot of fun, and you can get a great deal of enjoyment out of it. I get a great deal of enjoyment out of our experiences and our investigations. But you need to kind of take a mindset that if things start to go sideways, you know what you're going to do about it. And that's true of anything in life. Anything you're doing, if you could have something go wrong, but you need a backup plan for if something does go wrong. I hope you enjoy using these techniques and tricks that I've mentioned here. Like I said, you don't need to go and spend millions of dollars on equipment. In fact, you can even come up with your own ways of connecting with spirit, because intention is everything. In fact, one of the interesting things that I'm going to be trying over the next little while as the veil thins further and communication becomes more possible is a technique that I just came up with. And what I have, it's a dice technique. Now these are D&D dice. For any of my gamers out there, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But this particular one is a 20-sided die, and this one is a 6-sided die. So in total, you can get numbers up to and including 26. Now why is that important? Because there are 26 letters in the alphabet. So if you assign a number to each letter, you may possibly be able to roll words. So I'm going to check this out over the next little while, and I may do a video of me checking it out and see what we come up with. It could just be absolute garbage and make no sense, and that's fine. It was a fun experiment. It will be a fun experiment anyway. But if not, this could be an actually interesting technique that could be used. Like I said, be inventive. Find your own way of communicating with the spirits, and I think sometimes when we come up with our own ways, those are the best ways for us. Now, the other thing I'm going to talk about is if you are brand new to paranormal phenomena, there is a wonderful game that is being offered by the sponsors of today's video. Today's video was sponsored by a company from Ontario, and I'm going to show you they've got a funny little wonderful film. I'm going to put that in right after this. Their information will be down below. And it's Haunted Walks Incorporated, and they are doing a wonderful game called A Haunting at Home. And it's a fantastic way to get your feet wet in the paranormal if you've never experienced it and never done this kind of thing before, because it is completely moderated, so you have someone who guides you through everything. It's a series of 6 experiments, some of which I may have touched on in today's video, which will give you a great way to introduce yourself to things like pendulum use. And it is a lot of fun. I had a ton of fun, and we did have experiences, which was surprising, because I was kind of skeptical at first, because it's a game, but it's not so much a game as it is an experiment. And it's definitely worth doing if you're interested in the paranormal. It is completely safe. Your house will not become haunted. Nothing will attach to you. If you get too scared, there is a way to get out of the game at any time if anybody's uncomfortable. It's super, super simple. It's easy to load. It's easy to set up. You don't have to download anything. It's entirely online, so you don't have to worry about any of that kind of stuff. And the equipment that you need for it is very minimal, and like I said, you'll need thread, some paper, pencils, a couple of objects that might have a significance to you, but all of that is given to you. The whole list of everything that you'll need is given to you on the website, and it is a fun game. So do check them out. I'm going to show you a little bit of our experience now, and show you their website, their film from their website. They're definitely 100% worth doing. So have fun with it. It is a lot of fun. Is there anyone here? Whoa, the energy with you is so different. Yes. It's moving more towards the
somewhere. And oh, yours is definitely saying something.
Oh my God, yours is crazy.
What did they make of it?
Oh, she's one. Mom was really.
4 GR.
You?
Oh,
That was the automatic writing experiment for the game that we're playing, and this stuff is crazy. Crazy. If you see anything in this, let me know. This is some of the writing that we got. It's not answering. So I do hope you enjoyed that little film of us getting our ghost on with automatic writing and pendulum. There were, of course, other experiments that I didn't show you, but we had a great time. Even the cat seemed to enjoy it. Until next time, do check out the sponsor. And until next time, be safe and don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night, because they're there in the light too.